is acquisition. If no one switches from an existing alternative to you, then nothing gets started. And so the first thing we're trying to do here is make this transition happen. So the reason we run problem interviews is to understand the current reality. So that's the first half of the customer forces picture. So we want to understand what is their story today. What triggered them? What have they bought? How is that thing working? And then that's where you want to identify the Darth Vader. Remember, there is no such thing as a perfect solution. Every solution out there, including yours, is going to have problems. So your job in the problem interviews is to identify the problems that you do see. Are they problems worth solving? Do they represent monetizable pain? Do they kind of level up to being Darth Vader type status, or are they really more of a annoyance which no one's going to really pay money for, or it's something they can ignore? That's what we're really doing in the problem interviews, is trying to figure out what their current reality story is. And that's when you can stack your future reality, which is what this slide is, which is what the second part of the canvas is showing, the second canvas here is showing, which is you want to get them to switch. So you want to get them to fire the existing alternative and hire you instead. And the way you do it is with the pull of your offer. So you have to ideally anchor against their existing alternative, anchor their price, you anchor the problems against it, anchor your value proposition against it. Your demo should convince them that you can actually deliver something better. And then the pricing should give them reason as the call to action to at least try your product, whether that's a pilot, whether that's a trial, but at least try your product. And that's what acquisition is all about. And that's where it stops. It's that first transition. So even though we can draw a very big customer forces picture of what the outcome will be of your customer, here in this next set of slides, we're going to break it down into a bunch of steps. And so we're going to take a big journey and break it into smaller ones because it makes it more manageable, and also tells you how you can walk the journey piece by piece in a more systematic manner. So once you've got acquisition, we're now in the MVP land. So this is, again, a bit further for some of you, but again, I think it would help in kind of getting the picture of what comes next. But once you get into the MVP land, the next step here is activation, which is getting them to that aha moment, getting them to realize that your product is indeed better. So up until now, you've only promised them that. You've only said, hey, I have something better. What you have doesn't work. Here's something better. Come try it out. So that's just a promise. They're going to take a leap of faith. They've seen a demo. They're going to think that, okay, I'll give this a go, and if it works, I'll do more of it. If not, I'll go back to my existing solution. There's a bit of that trial period, which is what acquisition to activation is all about. And this is where the onboarding is very, very critical. If you just acquire people and then give them your MVP and don't talk to them, and just say, hey, use my product, let me know if it works, chances are they will run into issues, and chances are they will feel like they're not being helped, because again, it's much more comfortable to go back to a solution that they know has problems, but at least they're an expert on the workarounds for those problems. Now when they have your new solution, it has new sets of problems and their beginners are on it. That's very daunting. So again, for most people, if you just leave them alone with a not so perfect solution, they're just going to walk away from it. And that's why the high touch concierge approach and all those high touch approaches I was advocating early on are very powerful in the beginning, because they help you to supplement that weakness in your solution. So again, activation, very important. This is where you need to realize that your own solution will have a set of problems, and the quicker you can discover that, the quicker you can fix that, the higher the chances that people will stick around and you get your first 1 to 10 customers. In that process, you will learn a ton about what's broken and what to fix, so that your next 10 or your next 100 should have a much smoother process in your journey. So now we show kind of the stacking of the rest of the picture. So the first was acquisition, getting them into your customer factory. The next step here is activation. So this is again where you would design an onboarding path for getting them not again all the way through getting maybe the outcome of your product, but getting them to the first aha moment in the shortest time frame possible. So this is giving them something of value where they realize that this is something better than the alternative. So if I were using the business plan example, the end outcome would be maybe somebody raising money, somebody building a team, somebody building a successful product. That's where we'd like everyone to get to. But if I promise that up front, and tell them just use my product for 6 to 9 months and you'll get there, that's a big leap of faith. If I just say use my product blindly, just go on faith, that's a big ask, and not many people are going to stick with it unless they are getting some reinforcements along the way. And this is where you have to design the onboarding path. So for us, for instance, we might say, well, instead of trying to do everything up front, why don't you just create a lean canvas for the first 30 minutes, spend some time with it, and then go and do these other things, and then go these other things. And so you're stacking a bunch of activities and designing an onboard experience piece by piece instead of trying to design it all the way through. And that's what this is beginning to show. So that's where, when you're designing your MVP, think of your activation moment. How will people know that your thing is working? What is the success metric that you will use? I know I've talked to some of you in the one-on-one sessions, and I brought this up. So some of you are doing pilots, maybe 3-month pilots, the question would be, well, how would the customer and you know that the pilot worked? If it's just time, that's not good enough, because at the end of 3 months, you might say, well, I think things went well, now give us money, and they might say we want to do some more testing. And then those 3 months can easily become 6 months. And remember, a big company, which is typically who you might be going after in a pilot scenario, has all the time in the world. For them, time is not as expensive as it is for you. So it's very important for you to be pushing for those types of things. So you want to figure out what the activation moment is going to be in their mind and in your mind, have some clarity around that, have some metrics around that, and drive towards that. Because if you can get to that point, they can now begin to see evidence that your MVP is at least better, or it's in the right direction than what they had before, and they're willing to invest a little bit more time with you. And that's where the retention component comes in. And I'm just here, doing a more of a blanket deliver ongoing value type of a statement. That's because what you're going to do next is going to be dependent on how your service is built. So your initial value might be, a small piece, and then you're just either incrementally delivering it. Sometimes it's a recurring thing. So people can have, like, if I use the ride sharing example, Uber and Lyft and all those companies out there, many of them have used the first ride as a marketing tactic. They will give you the first ride for free. That is the activation moment. And then the rationale is that if you found that better than the existing alternative, which might be taxi or a bus or whatever, or public transportation, the next time around, you would just hire them instead. So it's kind of ongoing value, which is just recurring and repeated. But in other cases, you take them deeper into the funnel. So this is where you may have a whole roadmap of features that they start with one, and as they get over the first one, then you then show them more advanced features in your product. You're moving them up this spectrum from beginner to expert status. That's what this slide is really conveying. Now, tools for this. So this is where I'll just let you kind of scan this, but these are just different life cycle events in your customer journey where the forces canvas can still be used. So like the lean canvas, it's not something that's used just in the beginning. You use it throughout the product life cycle. So in Lean Stack, for instance, we have different points when we are talking to people, and we're not necessarily focused in on the entire canvas. I'm not trying to figure out, the entire nine boxes or so that are on the customer forces canvas. I might hone in on some of them. So when people initially sign up, I want to understand what were they using before, how do they find us, and why did they hire us? And what was the attraction of our product versus the alternative? And why is that helpful? It helps us in all kinds of channels and all kinds of marketing campaigns where we can show up where the competition is, and we can essentially tell people, we can hijack their traffic. We might use a Google ad, target their product, and you see a lot of this online, by the way, so it's not something that I'm just inventing here. But you might search for a competitor product, find an ad that says, use us instead, or here's an alternative to the competitor product, or this versus that. And then you would go and you would see a breakdown of why your product stacks up against what they were considering, and that might cause switch. So just in that conversation alone, focusing in on the trigger, focusing in on what they were using and why they signed up to your product allows you to learn a bunch of things that you can use to acquire your next 10, next 100 customers by just by turning that into a campaign that you would then test. You can do the same thing in different parts of your life cycle when people become active or inactive, when people cancel